In 1966, a pair of investors partnered up with the owners of the AFL's San Diego Chargers and were awarded an expansion NBA team in Seattle. They named themselves the Supersonics as an homage to the city's aviation history and to a new Boeing plant that had just opened. After 41 seasons, one championship, and 2 other finals appearances, the team moved to Oklahoma City and became the Thunder. So what's it like growing up being a fan of a team that no longer exists? Let's find out. I'm Dan Hopper, and this is Thrill of Defeat. I'm here with Danny Kelly, who's a senior staff writer at The Ringer, and Matt Ufford from Yahoo Sports, the head of video and audio, formerly of ESPN. And Matt, I feel like I first maybe met you on Twitter from seeing your Adam Sandler tweet and immediately following you after that. I think that was one of those just stupid tweets you just can't stop laughing at. And then I followed you, and that's how our online friendship maybe started.
Viral 13 years ago, and still hanging around.
And here we are.
It's
really the strongest bonds that are formed are tweet makes you laugh and follow the person. Yeah. So we're blood brothers here. And
I'm just look, I've fallen into the world of like management, but I'm a shit poster at heart.
Nice.
Oh, that's the Matt I know and love, the shit poster Matt.
Exactly.
Back from the SB Nation days, yeah.
Everybody prefers shit poster Matt, except for like my boss.
Sure.
We've all grown up and gotten real jobs after, it's like the whatever, all the Gen X punk people like who work in accounting or something,
Right.
But it's just for doing a dumb Adam Sandler Photoshop 13 years ago. That was our punk rock.
Yeah.
So today I wanted to talk about a form of sports pain that, even though so much sports fandom pain is universal, and that's kind of why I started this podcast, is something I've never experienced personally, and that is a team moving out of town. And the Seattle Supersonics, a team, from a populated, kind of sports-crazed city that doesn't exist anymore. The team, not the city. and as someone who didn't follow it that closely, I just don't really know how that happened. So could you just let me know, where are you guys from originally, and what are some of your early memories following the Supersonics?
Danny, you should go first because my bona fides are not as strong.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, I grew up in the Seattle area. For those who are around here, I grew up in Bellingham, so close enough. And I was super into basketball growing up. I played basketball all throughout my life. I played in high school. The Sonics were my first love when it came to sports. I remember my dad I think they used to sell these like 6 or 7 game season or whatever, like packages where you can go to 6 or 7 games. I can't remember which it was. And so we would drive down from Bellingham and go to these games. And it was like a very formative time for me. The Sean Kemp, Gary Payton era was really when I think truly fell in love with the team and got incredibly into the Sonics for a good chunk of my life. So, yeah, just growing up, going to games at the old Key Arena, and just loving that era of the Sonics during obviously the Michael Jordan heyday was when that was all kind of going down. But yeah, the Kemp Payton era, that was like really what I grew up on.
Matt?
So I was born at McCord Air Force Base, which is essentially Tacoma. But I was about 2 years old when I moved away from Washington and spent the next rest of my life away from the state largely. But my dad is from the Pacific Northwest. I got to take a drink of water. Sorry.
That's fine. Getting so choked up.
Right out of the gate,
2-year-old
right out
Matt
of the
moving
gate.
away. I can't leave Seattle. I'm going to miss it so much. It's all I've known.
But growing up as a kid, like the way that I moved every 3 years, and the way that I held on to like a notion of home was through Seattle sports. So, I rooted for the Seahawks. I rooted for the Mariners. I rooted for the Sonics, like kind of blindly as like the one kid in Altus, Oklahoma, or Southern Illinois, or New Jersey.
Oklahoma
was like the
Interesting
one
foreshadowing.
weirdo with like the one weirdo with like a starter jacket for the Seahawks. Everybody's like, why? This is before like leagues and player or like teams and players
Hmm.
transcended like geography. And so like everybody in New Jersey was rooting for the Eagles. We were 45 minutes outside of Philly. So there was like some Eagles, there was a little bit of Giants, but I was the weird kid. Every place I stopped. And my dad was not a big NBA fan, but sometime in the early 90s, I had a subscription to Sports Illustrated, and they sent out with a subscription, you got this NBA video that was like all like musical montages to NBA stars. And I forget the name of the video, but like there's like a cohort of people about my age that associate Charles Barkley with the Warrior, Michael Jordan with Take Your Breath Away. It's just like it was. Larry Bird with John Mellencamp. Uh, I grew up in a small town, and it was just
Yeah,
like,
little pink houses.
and that kind of sparked for me like NBA fandom, and it was very conveniently right at the start of the Sonics being awesome.
Uh-huh.
So the '90s was really like everyone remembers like the finals run that was derailed by George Karl thinking that the best defender in the league shouldn't be on
Oh
Michael
God.
Jordan.
Right.
Hmm.
But it was actually like a 6, 7, 8 year run of the Sonics being like awesome. Like
Hmm.
Sean Kemp and Gary Payton, those teams were incredible, and really lived and died with that team in the '90s.
Oh man. That's so interesting you kept the fandom because I know there's people who, you're 10, 12, and you move away and maybe you keep it, but like to be kind of two, you could have easily just jumped to whatever city you went to, but keeping that the whole time is, I don't know.
I was an
That's really
absolute
cool.
freak. I was an absolute freak. Like I from like a very young age, I was like, I'm different, and I don't know. I guess
Uh,
it paid dividends like decades later, but I made a lot of unnecessary heartache for me in the first like 2 decades of life.
yeah, yeah, I could see. So when I prepared for this podcast, I was looking up the history of the Supersonics. I had no memory. I mean, obviously I wasn't alive for this, but I've never even heard anyone talk about they won the NBA championship in 1979.
Yeah.
That's got to be one of the most like kind of mainstream forgotten titles like of all time. Because I was like, what? And I was reading about the team that did it and the series, and I'm like, I have no memory of this. I've never seen a documentary about this. There's so many sports things where it's like, I've never seen, I barely remember the 80s Mets, but I've seen 15 documentaries about them. Do you have any memory? What is the legacy of this like 1979 title to Seattle? And do you have any like thoughts about it? How does it come up? Did it come up during your fandom? Like, or is it just this weird like curiosity that's lost to time?
I I think that there's a couple things at play. The ABA NBA merger that happened in the '70s, like the NBA didn't truly catch on as a league. And look, I know that there's people that are out there riding hard for Bill Walton and Wes Unseld and like Rick Barry, but like the 1970s was, I wasn't alive for most of the 1970s,
It's okay. You can
but
rip on
like
it.
the league just didn't have the cachet. Like it was Magic and Bird coming to the NBA that like, you know, it was such a big deal because
Hmm.
they were in the NCAA tournament versus each other. They were the biggest stories,
Hmm.
and ended up being on rivals in the NBA. That it's kind of like we're seeing it with the WNBA now with Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, where they had a college rivalry that carried over into the league.
Hmm.
Um, that's the sort of thing that was like I think the propulsive thing that made the NBA a cultural institution. And you know, yes, the Sonics 1979 championship is kind of forgotten. They were also in the NBA Finals the year before, and they lost to like the most forgettable Washington Bullets team. Apologies to Wes Unseld, but like that's just kind of how I see it as like you know the Trailblazers have a title from the late '70s too, and it's just like unless it's padding the stats of the Celtics or the Knicks or the Warriors with their 70s championships. You know, the Sonics and the Bullets, now Wizards, are kind of like a little bit in the it's archaic, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think same for me. I mean, I wasn't alive at the time, so and I really didn't get into basketball till I don't know 90 or something like that. So it was sort of just like I kind of picture it like it's the Old Testament. It's like it's there. You don't really know the details of it. There's some pretty famous people, Moses, Lenny Wilkins, Jack Sikma.
And and we root for the Nebuchadnezzar, you know?
Right. So to me, it's like it's something that is there in the Seahawks, or sorry, in the Seattle sports lore and sort of the Seattle sports canon, but like I don't know anything about it really, to be totally honest. It's just like, yeah, the hockey team won a Stanley Cup back in 1917, and then the Sonics won in 1979, and that's all I really know.
Uh-huh.
And it's kind of just like it's just part of history, or 78, I guess, or no, it was 79. It's kind of like it's in the rafters. You're aware of it, but I don't have any like emotional attachment to it really, and so yeah, that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, Magic and Bird is the perfect example of, I don't remember that from the time really. I was very little, but I've seen 10 million things about them. I know the story, I know all the games, and it's like I can't tell you who was on the 70s Sonics or the 70s Bullets, like you said,
Yeah.
because there's some teams that don't even win a title, and it's like, oh, these guys are legends in this town, and they'll never buy a drink again. And it's the 79 Supersonics are buying their own drinks still. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think that I think part of it too, like the MVP of the Sonics title run was not like a long time Supersonic, and like he
Hmm.
ended up getting more. By the time I was collecting basketball cards, collected all sorts of sports cards as a kid. By the
Hmm.
time I was collecting basketball cards, like Dennis Johnson was a Celtic,
Hmm.
and that was the thing that like stood out to me, that like it was never. I was not getting like run of tops from 1979 to get like what Dennis Johnson was about in that year. Even though like you had to flip to the back and be like, oh, he was on the Sonics, cool.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I like my connection with I think the strongest connections I have to that team is just Lenny Wilkins, Seattle.
Hmm.
He's kind of a legend here in Seattle. He played for the Sonics, coached the Sonics, and then Jack Sikma he was an assistant coach with the Sonics. And so that's kind of like how I knew about him. I'm like, oh, he used to play for the Sonics. He played for them when they won the title. But that's like kind of all I really knew. And I just
Hmm.
remember hearing Jack Sikma's name a lot growing up.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But I feel like, right up top, you mentioned the players that I think of immediately as a kind of a lay fan when I think of the Sonics. I immediately think of, Sean Kemp in the early 90s, and specifically him losing the dunk contest 4 times. I don't know why I remember that
Yeah.
so vividly, but when I think Seattle Supersonics, I think, the Gary Payton 90s Sonics. And I don't really know much about the 70s and 80s Sonics, and I don't honestly know that much about the 2000 Sonics. But what was it about the 90s Sonics that got you hooked, and what was like kind of the fan atmosphere as they started to become a really good, really popular team?
Yeah, I think it was, well, number one with Kemp and Peyton, two young guys. I think they drafted them in back-to-back seasons, or it was really close together when they drafted those two guys. They started doing the alley-oop dunks, like that electrified, I think the city. And, they just had some very memorable plays. They had very memorable play style. Gary Payton was like the original Marshawn Lynch, where he's just, shit talking and brash. He's from Oakland. He's got a great accent, all that stuff. He's just kind of like helping the Sonics turn into a real thing and turn into, I think they were sort of like, not really part of the big NBA culture at that time. It was just like some other team, but now they started to be good and they had a real run there where for most of the 90s they were winning like 50 plus games a year. And so I think it just like number one, Kemp and Peyton made them cool because they were doing
Hmm.
these really cool plays. The alley oops were iconic. Sean Kemp was like jumping and dunking over dudes from like the free throw line. Like he has so many iconic dunks. One of the most iconic dunkers of really of NBA history, probably. I don't know, like I wouldn't make that list, but I think he'd probably be on it. And so I think that was like the main thing. There's like tons of other great like side characters in that whole era, like Detlef Schrempf, Sam Perkins, the Hersey Hawkins. You could go down like there's tons of great like ancillary characters, but those two guys for sure were sort of like we're cool because we've got these guys.
Did their playing styles sum up the city of Seattle in some way?
Plucky
I'm just
underdog.
trying to
Well, I
make
think
every
what's important to
documentary here.
recognize, and something that has kind of been glossed over because Seattle's so remote from the rest of the country, is that like Seattle is truly like a big time basketball town,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
and you see it with like all these like NBA oddities slash like true hoopers, Jamal Crawford and Nate Robinson are just great examples of like Seattle guys and are like beloved as like Washington products. And there's a lot of like pride and like Jamal Crawford has like an annual like competition that draws like super famous players, and it's just like there is a real basketball culture to Seattle that even
Hmm.
a never Seattle resident, like take a certain amount of pride in.
Hmm.
And like peeling away the Sonics, which is, the team that at that point had won the only major sports championship, like was like a serious like blow to the city.
Hmm. Another thing that immediately came to mind too was that they had a stacked NBA Jam roster. I think in tournament edition, I looked it up. It's Sean Kemp, Gary Payton, Kendall Gill,
Yeah.
Detlef Schrempf was in the console version, and then Benoit Benjamin, not Benoit Benjamin, right?
Yeah. Benoit Benjamin.
Benoit Benjamin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say Benoit Benjamin, that I immediately
No.
remembered. I haven't pronounced that name out loud in
Yeah. Yeah.
35 years or whatever. But yeah, Kemp. I mean, if you're doing a 2-on-2 basketball tournament and you have Kemp and Peyton, that's as good as anyone in the league.
I
Yeah,
remember.
it was a fun team and for sure.
I mean, Kemp had some, like I said, he had some of the most iconic dunks. He dunked over Lister and then pointed at him. He had an incredible run of just like hang from the rim as you're catching an alley oop and dunking it, and like swing your legs all the way around the hoop and come out the other side.
Hmm.
Like his athleticism was truly just staggering. 6'10", 200, whatever he was, and his ability to like go up in the air and do that. And Peyton was great at throwing alley oops too. Peyton would throw them from like, 3/4 court, and it would be like on the money.
Hmm.
I remember Kendall Gill sort of like he wasn't super famous. I think he's kind of like after that era, but his sort of claim to fame was
Essential to the video game for the 3-point shooting, though.
I personally remember him vividly as the guy who would go up and dunk with his left hand. I feel like that was like his claim to fame. I was like always trying to do that, and like dunk hoops was like he's a right-handed guy, but he would go up and like dunk with his offhand, and I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. So that's like kind of my memory of Kendall Gill.
Awesome. It's cool that, a team getting good obviously is the number one way to get fans interested, but like getting good in a distinct way, I feel like always helps. It's like you have these two stars, they're known for like an exciting style of play, and I feel like it really stands out more than like, oh, this team from the city was technically good for a couple of years and forgotten about. It's like even I remember these 90 Sonics like very vividly.
I think the other thing is, and maybe this is just being here and kind of living it. Maybe not everyone else felt this, but Kevin Calabro being the guy who's doing the call for the Sonics, he was their like radio slash. I think he did TV. I can't remember. But he was their main, the voice of the Sonics, and he was iconic too because he had 100 different like amazing catchphrases. If when Sean Kemp would make a dunk, he would like go off with these crazy, just iconic calls. I wish I could remember some of them off the top of my head, but like he just kind of go crazy with his calls, and that was like a huge part of I think the whole coolness factor of the Sonics. They're an exciting team. You always want to turn them on because what are they going to do next kind of deal. And so I think
Yeah,
shouting out Kevin Calabro too is like a huge part of it. And when the Sonics left, he refused to do. I think they tried to get him to go to Oklahoma City to do to be their play caller, and he refused to do it. Yeah,
yeah, he gave him.
he's like F that. I think he went to Portland instead. So
You touched on a really good point, Dan, on the style of the team. That like at a time where like post Detroit Bad Boys, all the teams were built around kind of a central superstar, right? Like the biggest and best teams, whether it was Barkley or Jordan or Magic, and then Seattle's two stars like neither one of them for most of their careers were really going beyond 20 points per game. Gary Payton got better as a scorer, but he was never like that was never his cachet. Like he was all defense and passing. You know, Kemp, even at his most like rim shaking best, was still not really a 20 points per guy night. And that's the team that's built around defense. And then you had like Detlef Schrempf as like the only stretch five in the league at the time, like hitting corner threes. It was
Hmm.
just like it was a team of it felt different than other teams. And then
Mhm.
I think it's worth noting, like for the first full year that George Karl was coach, he came on like late in the season after was it Casey Jones got fired, and then from 92 93, they had 55 wins, 63 wins, 57 wins, 64 wins, 57 wins, 61 wins. That's the George Karl run. And I think that
Man.
like this is the team that had like 60 wins three times over 6 years and then was 55 plus the other their down years. Like a team was dominant. And then they would do stupid shit in the playoffs. Like there was a year that they got knocked out in the first round by the eighth seed. The
The
year they won
the
63.
Nuggets. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the 93-94 season. And that image of Mutombo, you know, like laying on the
Oh,
floor, grabbing the
he's just
ball.
like laying there crying.
It's
Oh,
so,
that's seared
and
into
like, it's one of
everyone's
those,
memories. Yeah.
that was when the series were the first round series were best of five. And it was
Mhm.
just like, I remember being gutted by that. And
That was the
then,
ultimate embarrassment. Yeah. That was tough.
yeah, they also lost in the first round. One of those other years too. They lost in the first round kind of
Was it to
outside of
the
that.
Lakers?
Well, these teams just kind of petered out at the Western Conference Finals. The year that like they lost to Jordan and the Bulls, they led the league in like all the advanced stats, like SRS that like points to like teams most likely to win championships. And then yeah, like George Karl just doesn't put Gary Payton on Michael Jordan for the first three games. They go down 3-0. Karl puts Payton on MJ. They win the next two, and it's
Yeah,
just
I'd
like, hey,
forgotten
maybe
about that. That
it
was tough.
was it was exceptionally stupid.
Man.
And then there's of course the Michael Jordan doc on the last dance. And Gary Payton is absolutely right that like he had the effect that like changed two games and Jordan's like, too bad. Loser, I don't remember that. It's just a hagiography for how great Jordan is. And he is great. He was the best of all time. But like that was a year that like I really think the Sonics were the team to unseat the Bulls and not any of the other also rans in the 90s.
Yeah, well, so let's get into that. I feel like again, as a kind of a casual follower of the Sonics slash NBA, I remember the Bulls beating them, and it's interesting that I had forgotten how dominant the Sonics were, and now kind of that time period of how good such a good, interesting, exciting team is now kind of reduced to like, oh, they made the finals. Now they're kind of this footnote in the Bulls history making run. And in like the Jordan doc, it's like you get to one scene, it's like, oh, they're playing the Sonics in this archival footage. But it's like, what is it like to, that is like kind of the pinnacle probably of your fandom. And now it's kind of it's in this other team's story, and they're kind of in the background losing in a very frustrating way, apparently.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
and I just looked it up. That was the year the Bulls won 72 games. So very obviously
Yeah.
that it's crazy that like the best ever season for the Sonics was of course the best ever year for like the greatest team of all time until
Uh-huh.
the Warriors, had their run.
I know, and
So
I'm looking this up too, because I remember that being like a big deal. 72 wins, second most ever. The Warriors got 73 in 2015, 2016. So, I mean, that was like one of the all-time seasons by the Bulls. But the Seahawks, or God, I keep doing NFL stuff. Sorry, the Sonics winning 64. That was like I remember at one at the time it was like one of the best seasons ever for a team too. It was like that was like a huge accomplishment for the Sonics too, but of course completely overshadowed by one of the greatest teams of all time.
Yeah.
yeah.
And the thing you mentioned about the finals, I didn't remember that. Why did they not put Gary Payton on Michael Jordan? Was there some galaxy brain reason? I mean, that sounds like the most
Yeah,
elementary thing.
Galaxy Brain's a good way to put it.
Understanding
Yes.
like two things about each team off the top of my head. That's like the one thing I would do.
I think it's just kind of like I don't want to leave George Karl like holding the bag here, but he's also the coach that authored a bunch of playoff exits despite having a 55, 57,
Hmm.
61, 63 win team like ahead of where they should have been. He assembled a great regular season team, and then when they
Hmm.
got to the playoffs, they would make some decisions that called into question
It's like the
like what
Andy
are you doing?
Reid, the Kyle Shanahan, the Andy Reid pre-Chiefs was known
Yeah.
for being like a playoff choker or whatever. Good
Yeah.
regular season coach, but then once you get to the playoffs, it all falls apart.
Marty
Uh,
Schottenheimer. He's
yeah,
a good one for
Oh
that.
man, he's the Marty Schottenheimer of the NBA. That stings, but it's accurate. Oh,
Sorry, dude.
that's all right.
I
Um,
That's all
think
right.
the Carl thing too is interesting because I remember him being an interesting character in the NBA at that time. Like he's kind of trying to think of a good example of like who he's like now, where he's not very nice to the media, or at least that was what I remember. Is
mhm.
like a lot of getting in lots of fights with media. There was a clip, Matt, that you shared the other day where it was like he called. He's like, I think you're kind of an asshole, to be honest. What's your problem? To like a reporter. I want to go back and figure out who he was asking that to. Um, but but yeah, I mean, he was always kind of on the edge. He fought with players and then ended up trading players away. He was
Mhm.
ultimately a big part of the reason Kemp ended up leaving, I think. So yeah, he was sort of mercurial a little bit, I guess,
Yeah.
of and
Furious
when it
George.
yeah
While
when it
while we're talking about feuding with players, we should also talk about the '90s Sonics in that Xavier McDaniel went out of Seattle around the same time as Peyton and Kemp came in, and then like for me, what really sealed it as like him being a Seattle guy though was Singles, the Cameron Crowe movie. Like Xavier McDaniel appears in like a daydream of one of the characters like in uniform and is like giving relationship advice, and I was like, yeah, this is my Seattle movie.
Oh my God.
Very much. It's aged horribly. It is very much like a relic of like Hollywood's vision of the Gen X emergence in Seattle and the music scene. But there's some Pearl Jam cameos. That's cool. Xavier McConnell famous for choking PJ Carlesimo during practice one time. Look
wait,
up.
the Latrell Sprewell was the one who choked Carlissimo. I'm
Oh, that's right.
McDaniel. If you
Oh,
look
Wes
up,
Matthews.
yeah, he choked a guy on the court.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, my brain put those together.
That will happen.
Multiple
I actually
90s
thought that
choking incidents.
My
So
my apologies. My apologies to various NBA
Latrell
players who have choked
Sprewell.
people.
he's like, hey, I choked a different dude.
I choked PJ Carlos, Latrell Sprewell. Wait, that was
Yeah.
me. Stolen
must
choke
must
valor.
credit. Yeah, watermark over him choking him
Uh,
somehow. You're like, what? Yeah. So what were I don't you don't need to tell me your exact ages, but your kids, I assume in the 90s. What was your reaction to them finally making the finals and then just kind of getting beaten by the Jordan Bulls?
ugh.
I mean the entire '90s were owned by Jordan, and even when Jordan
Yeah.
was out of the league, it's like will Jordan come back? Like, can Jordan learn to hit a curveball? Like
Yeah.
NBA news was
Oh
still
yeah.
like when he
Mm.
came back to the NBA as wearing number 45 for the Bulls, like it was just Jordan's decade,
Hmm.
and until he went to the Wizards anyway. There's a lot like for me, like I was really proud that the Sonics made it to the finals. I was like, heartbroken every year. If you're gonna get beat by like at that time the best team in NBA history, well, like you guys
Yeah.
gave it a run. Yeah, like the thing that hurt was like more than losing the series was going down 3-0 with like
Hmm.
an idiotic coaching move.
Hmm.
That's the thing that really hurt was just like, wow, like what could it have been if someone who didn't have galaxy brain coachitis like run that team for the first couple of games? Do we win one out
Yeah.
of the three? Like, and
Yeah,
then
you
then you're
might
getting
be
into
the
what ifs.
asterisks on the Bulls
Yeah,
90s like forever. Might be
and the
like, well,
Bulls, the
except for
Bulls never,
this.
the Bulls famously never played a game seven in the NBA Finals, and like, could that Sonics team have been the team? Like, even if you still lose game seven, well, we took the greatest team
Hmm.
ever to deeper than it's ever been, and I think that. it's not the loss to Jordan and the Bulls that like hurts me as much as the decision making. But like ultimately, like at the end of it, even after, getting my little teenage heart broken by the team, like I still was really proud of the team, because the other options at that point were the Mariners, who basically never had a winning season until 95. That was the year
But
that
they were
they went to the
cool.
ALDS. They
Hmm.
were super cool, but they were so uncool from 1977 until 1990.
Uh-huh.
And we're still bad the first couple of years of Griffey.
Yeah.
Um, and then the Seahawks were mired in the 90s was their lost decade.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
Hmm.
so like the Sonics were the only like truly like awesome team. The Mariners were getting cool because of Griffey, but the Sonics were like the great team, and
Hmm.
so I had a lot of pride in that team.
Yeah, same. I was like 13, 14 at the time. So I think eighth grade or freshman year, I can't remember. Super obsessed with the team at that point. I watched every single game, was going to games as much as I could. The energy around the team was incredible. I think the energy around the NBA at that time was, you can't really match it. Like it was the
Yeah.
biggest show at the
Yeah, I
time. I
remember
felt,
for sure.
I mean, it was so cool, and the NBA was the biggest deal at that time, and having the Sonics be one of the best teams in the league at that point, and having two of the most exciting stars in Peyton and Kemp. Um, I do remember, like, my memory of the finals was basically like, it was a bummer they lost the first two games. It came back to Seattle, I think, for game three, and they lost that. They got their asses kicked. And then it was like, okay, well, that sucks. It was kind of like an anticlimactic finals because they got down 3-0. And I think at that time, and maybe this is still true, no one had ever come back from 3-0. So it was like basically a foregone conclusion they were going to lose. But I remember thinking, at the time, at least they won two games, kind of made it interesting there for a minute. I think it's like, you start to make the Bulls sweat a little bit where, they're potentially trying to force game seven. So I remember thinking like this was super anticlimactic, but at least they pushed it to game six and, made it
Hmm.
respectable and kind of like saved face, I guess, a little bit. But yeah, like the feeling at the time was, you're running into Michael Jordan in the greatest season of all time. So it's
Hmm.
like, there wasn't I don't think that people were really expecting to win. They're kind of hoping to win, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah. I feel like a really underrepresented POV in sports is like, we look back at, you're like, oh, the 90s Bulls, everyone loved them. And it's like, not the people rooting for the teams they kept beating. It's
Right.
like I
Yeah.
was rooting for the Steelers against Tom Brady. And it's
Mm,
like, the GOAT, Tom Brady. I'm like, I hate him. Like, I was so mad at him over and over again. I don't want to be like this forgotten side note to this guy's like,
right.
hagiography. But
I
yeah,
will say that I delighted in the Jazz getting stomped by the Bulls. Like I always just
yeah.
hated the
The
Jazz.
Jazz. Oh my God. I think the biggest rivals for the Sonics in those days, at least in my mind, were the Jazz. I hated Karl Malone, hated Stockton with a
Hmm.
fiery passion. Those were, I think, the top. The Suns at the time were good. I remember like Charles Barkley on in that era of the Suns. They were, I think, the Sonics took them to. They were in the playoffs against them a couple of times. I think the Suns went to the finals and beat the Sonics in Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals, if I'm remembering that correctly. So they were
Hmm.
a big rival, and then the Rockets were pretty good at that time with Olajuwon and that era. So those teams I just remember hating all of them. But the nobody, I mean, I think Sonics fans hated the Jazz the most probably.
Yeah. Um,
Frickin' Malone when he would take like 15 seconds to shoot a free throw. I remember that being, I
Ugh.
remember viscerally hating him so much.
I
You're like
I
changing
love
color
that.
right
I love
now.
that history has shown him to be an absolute goon and a and a
Right.
and a real piece of shit because that's the way I always felt about him.
Yeah,
Right.
I was just gonna say, don't you feel bad that Malone and Stockton are both wonderful, great people now who are beloved? Yeah. Anyway, so given all this passion for the '90s Sonics and such memories and stuff, and just Seattle in general being so good with the Sonics and the MLS, the Sounders, and being such a sports mad city that's got a lot of middle class discretionary income, like how how did the Sonics just go away? Like I kind of barely remember the 2000s them moving. What is your memory of the initial talks that they might move? And did you believe it? And what did you feel like when this kind of actually became a reality?
Oh boy, I got
I
some beef.
I
Yeah.
always didn't. I always did. I remember at the time, I never felt like it was possible they would leave. When they finally did leave, I was like, wait, what?
Uh-huh.
How did they not stop this from happening?
Hmm.
Um, Even though, at the time, I think the vibes were pretty atrocious with the Sonics for a few years there.
There was some real chicanery on like
Sure, right.
from Howard Schultz. So Howard Schultz is the founder of Starbucks, a
Hmm.
billionaire, had bought the Sonics, and then
Democratic
um
presidential candidate for half a
oh my
day.
gosh. Oh my gosh. I cannot get into this. Um but the year that they had a resurgence with Ray Allen,
Hmm.
Rashard Lewis, and they had kind of like a third sharpshooting star that I'm forgetting right now. It's
Was it
not.
Vladimir Radmanovich that you were thinking of, the other guy? Vladdy Radmo? I love that guy.
Surely that was it. Um, so Howard Schultz wanted a new arena, and he wanted Seattle to pay for a new arena, but
Hmm.
they had already built a new arena for the Mariners at the cost of Seattle. That was around the 95, 96 timeline where like the ALDS like exciting 5 game series over the Yankees was like what saved baseball in Seattle and got Seattle to pay for what I think is now T-Mobile Park,
Yep.
whatever
Yep.
the new one's called now. And then
What did they call it
similarly with
originally? What was it called originally?
Was it Safeco Field?
Safeco
Safeco.
Field? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then a similar thing happened with the Seahawks where they were going to be like the shithead owner at the time of the Seahawks was like looking to move the team
Hmm.
because like not enough people were going and the Kingdom sucked.
Mm.
And Paul Allen bought the team and
Hmm.
like spearheaded the building of the new stadium. Most of it, like a lot of it with his own money, but also Seattle chipped in. So like
Hmm.
already in the previous like 5 to 6 years, 5 to 7 years, Seattle as a city had funded like two new sports stadiums, and Key Arena at the time had been renovated in the mid '90s, but it wasn't nice enough or it didn't have enough box seats. It didn't have enough like
Hmm.
Right.
luxury capacity to bring in the revenue for what was expected of a 21st century NBA team. And Seattle was like, no, we're not. We've been building stadiums. We're not building a new arena. This one was just refurbished a decade ago. Schultz then sold the team famously after looking, quote unquote, looking for a local buyer, sold to Oklahomans, Clay Bennett and Aubrey McClendon. And Clay Bennett famously was in close friends with David Stern, and they were supposed to make a good effort to keep the team, or like a good, honest effort to keep the
Good
team in
faith effort.
Seattle.
Yeah.
Good faith effort. And they just didn't. They had plans from the beginning to move the team to Oklahoma City,
Hmm.
which got a taste of the Hornets after before they were the Pelicans. Got a taste of the New Orleans Hornets after Hurricane Katrina, and we're gunning for like, oh, we're a hungry NBA market in waiting. And it's like, look, man, I don't think it's a hot take to say that Seattle is in every way a better city than Oklahoma City. Like, there's just in any diversity, culture, revenue, population. It's like by any stretch of the imagination, Seattle has like a riper opportunity to be a successful NBA team in terms of revenue and support for the team.
Well,
And
resentment's coming out. I like it.
oh baby, so here's the other thing, and I'm sorry that I'm sorry that you touched a nerve.
No,
So
this is what this podcast is for. Be as
this
mean as you want.
was this is mid 2000s, the aughts,
Hmm.
right? And this is before social media, and this is before there's a widespread understanding that billionaires are just going to do whatever billionaires do,
Hmm.
and they
Hmm.
like control us. Like at the time, like the team was intentionally made to be bad so that fans
Right.
wouldn't come out and support it.
It's like the
Like
movie Major
Yeah,
League or whatever.
it's the Major League
it was a
strategy.
hatchet job. It
Right,
was a
right,
Hmm.
right.
hatchet job by management because they wanted to move the team to Oklahoma City. And now when it happens with like the Oakland A's and
Hmm.
they get moved by like shitty management, fans and media alike call it out like this is the owner doing bullshit.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah,
when
yeah.
it's, you know, 20 years ago, the narrative in the media and among fans was like, oh, they're not supporting their team. They probably don't deserve one.
Hmm.
Right.
And it's kind of preposterous. They were
Also, to be clear,
45.
they bought the team. The Clay Bennett ownership group bought the team with the idea of for sure moving the team. There was like emails that indicated as much. The city sued. I
Yeah.
don't know who they sued, but they sued maybe the NBA, whoever they sued to try and stop the move because it was not good faith by the ownership group. All that stuff ended up not really working. But there was a fight to keep the Sonics from, fans from the city. I can't remember exactly how it all went down, but like there was lawsuits, there was strong attempts to make it all work. And then it just didn't end up happening. I think that's kind of like my point of view. That's kind of what I was going to get to. I was
Yeah.
not trying to blame it on the fans whatsoever. I didn't think the vibes were low, but I never thought it would get so low that the team would actually leave, is what I was kind of getting
Mhm.
Yeah.
to. And it's like,
And I
man,
like
it kind of like came out of nowhere. It felt like, where it was like, oh, they're gone. Like, we can't stop this now.
I think part of it too, Danny, is like I'm a couple years older than you, and by 2006, I was like professionally following sports
Yeah.
as a dumbass sports blogger. So I was like following every story and being online in '06, like when Sonics fans like gnashed their teeth about what's happening to the Sonics, there would be like I would always be overrun with people from Oklahoma, I'm guessing, saying like you guys don't deserve a team. And it's like,
Oh.
and
Yeah,
their
yeah, yeah.
shittiness about it that like we deserve a team, you guys don't, is just like, how do you? I'm not asking y'all to feel guilty about it. I want you to love your team. Like we lost it, like Seattle lost their team, and like we're gonna be mad about it forever. You guys don't have to feel sorry 20 years in. Like it's now the Thunder, and while I personally think that the only good payback is to move the Thunder back to Seattle. That's the only like I don't want a new Sonics team. I don't want like this bullshit like
Right,
I don't want the
right.
Baltimore Ravens. I want the Sonics and like I all the cool players that are awesome for the Thunder, they belong in green and yellow in Seattle. Like
Also, like
so
just for a perfect example of what you're saying, Matt, it's like I went to look up the history of the Sonics and it fucking pulled up Oklahoma City Thunder on the
that
basketball
shit
reference
basketball
page.
reference
And I'm
pisses
like,
me off.
no, what the fuck?
No.
I
Yeah,
don't
they
like
you
this
move
at
That's
the
all.
team, they own the history.
Yeah.
Scoring records and banners and stuff. And
But I think that
Oklahoma
when they
City won a
did
title in 1979. I don't know if you, I don't know if you guys knew
oh,
no,
that.
no, they act
you're
when they made the sale, the part of the agreement was the Sonics, or sorry, Seattle get to keep the Sonics colors, their history, all
Oh,
that
that's right.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So no, the Oklahoma City did not win a championship in
yeah.
1979.
And look, this was not like the Sonics were never a moribund franchise. Like they went 52 and 30 in 2004, 2005 with that Rashard Lewis, Ray Allen team, making sure I'm not saying Ray Lewis, who was another person I don't
Ray
like in sports.
Lewis.
But that's to me is like this is a good team. They were well run, and then it was the choice of it was a conspiracy. It was a conspiracy to steal the
It
Sonics
truly
away.
was. It actually
It's a
was.
legitimate true conspiracy in
It's
every
also,
definition.
I think, and Howard Schultz has been vilified in Seattle ever since. It's funny that he's still, Starbucks is still based here and everything because he sold the team in like a few years. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Why are you buying a team? And then just like, actually, I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to sell it. I think people
It's
people here are still will never forgive him for that.
Yeah. And then he's come out and said that like that was his big mistake. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. It
Correct.
was a mistake. Go back to your mansion and take your son who wants to be an NBA insider with you.
I was just
People don't
picturing Matt
forget. Yeah.
Matt on 2006 internet fighting with Oklahoma City people
Just
on
like you don't have to be shitty
dig.com
about
or
it.
something.
You don't have to like, hey, sorry about you. Like, we're really happy about the team. Sorry that you guys lost yours. Like that's like the basic human interaction. You guys don't
Yeah.
deserve a team. I'm mad about like my favorite Sonics moment of the last 20 years was Kevin Durant leaving OKC. I was thrilled about it. I
Yeah.
was like, I've rare like my Schadenfreude will like I'm taking it all the way to the grave with me.
There
Like
was there was a
it's never going
strong
to lessen.
You
100%.
continued the
There was
thread from 2006 internet. It hadn't been touched in like a decade. Like, aha! I was waiting to dunk on this
what's up
guy.
now?
It's just some weird defunct thread from like an
Yeah.
old.
I
Sorry,
remember
Yeah.
when they lost in the finals, that was a strong Schadenfreude or whatever too for Sonics fans around the
Oh
world.
yeah.
Everyone was just like,
When they
no.
every
Also,
time the Warriors beat them in the playoffs,
yeah.
like I would, and again, like for me too, I was like, well, Kevin Durant started his career in Seattle.
He
His
was a
his
Sonic.
first year in the
Yeah.
NBA as a rookie was as a
Mm-hmm.
Sonic. And like, oh, has he gone to a West Coast team with a notable Bay and with a lot of tech build up around it? Wonder why he would do that. Because he
Yeah.
never wanted to leave Seattle. That's my other thing. I was like, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
if they'd never left, then they wouldn't have been cash strapped, and James Harden wouldn't have been traded away. They definitely would have won a championship in the 2010s with those
Yeah.
three. I will say anything hurtful. I'm a hurt person, and I'm out to hurt Thunder fans back. And like even now, as like the Thunder are very clearly the best team in the NBA, I'm like I just can't help but like I hope something goes wrong for them.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
And
I think that the hardest part, well, obviously losing the team and the just overall excitement that they would always bring. Because I mean, like obviously we talked about the Kemp Payton era, but the Ray Allen era was super fun. Like he was one of the
Mm-hmm.
most fun players to watch in that time in the NBA. Just like how quickly he was shooting the ball. Can you tell I write about the NFL? But like
With Ray Lewis.
yeah, he was so fun to watch. Those eras were really fun too. So it's not like there was just one good era with the Sonics that we got to enjoy. There was like multiple different versions of the team that were super likable, super exciting. But I think when the Sonics left for Oklahoma City took Durant and then obviously got really good really quickly. I think that was like especially just
Mm-hmm.
added insult to injury and like Kevin Durant was supposed to be ours kind of deal. And we still claim him, honestly. I think
there's still like
yeah.
there are still photographs of Kevin Durant and Sonics draft pick Russell Westbrook standing next to each other with
Yeah.
Sonics jerseys. Like
Yeah.
I saw it with my own eyes.
So if he wins, it counts for Seattle. It's like the American Idol stars who sign like the 50-year contracts. It's like they're just owned forever by. It's like this is Seattle. This counts Seattle.
And I
I
think
do.
Durant too has been great because I think he's always, whenever he's gotten the opportunity, he's always spoken in favor of bringing basketball back to Seattle, and he's kind of like one of the main ambassadors, honestly, for it. So
Mm-hmm.
we respect him and love him for that too.
So do you think they'll get a team eventually?
Yeah,
Like, you
Yeah.
do think so?
the NBA scuttlebutt is that Las Vegas and Seattle are going to get teams,
Mm-hmm.
and the read that I don't necessarily agree with, but maybe true, is that like the NBA is waiting to announce both, but the speculation is that LeBron's going to have like an ownership piece of the Las Vegas team, and they
Okay.
don't want to announce the return of the Sonics first before LeBron gets to announce or gets to be a part of the Las Vegas expansion team. That is, I'm not all up in arms about that. It feels like rumor central, but like
Mm-hmm.
the Sonics are coming back. It's going to happen.
Cool. And
Yeah,
Detlef
I
Schrempf will
agree.
be the part owner, like
I
LeBron.
think I think the important thing is there needs to be an expansion draft, and the Sonics get Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and Chet Holmgren just like automatically.
All
The
right. So
I'm into that
so
idea.
looking
the,
back
the
at
prima nocte
Oh
of
my God.
NBA franchises.
um so looking back at your fandom in the 90s and now, like, what does it feel like to imagine kind of growing up with this team, having a team that's like, very ingrained in your childhood and your teenage years and kind of grounded you back to Seattle, that just kind of goes away and you still have those memories, but the team doesn't exist. Like, how do you kind of juggle both those things in your head?
Um,
Yeah, that's tough.
I I think for me, I'm such a different person now. Like
Uh-huh.
as like I've been working in the sports media industry for 20 years.
Hmm.
And I've become a father, and my kids are old enough to like follow sports themselves.
Who do they root for?
And we used to live in Connecticut, so they have very close ties to like UConn basketball. We took them
Okay.
to a bunch of
Mm.
UConn women's games. So like that's kind of like know the cheers for the UConn Huskies.
Hmm.
My son is into the Dodgers. They're the closest baseball team to us,
Hmm.
like and like I'm in favor of go ahead, like root for the local team.
Yeah,
It's
Oh yeah.
awesome.
totally.
I
Like
mean, it
I
seems
grew
like
up
a good time to do
Seattle
it.
fans.
Yeah.
Please have a happy life. Have a good
I
relationship
know,
with your sports
seriously.
teams.
Hmm.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I wonder what that's like.
Hmm.
And meanwhile, like over the years, like I've had I've had joy at the Seahawks winning a championship, but I've also like had to reevaluate my own like diehard aspect and relationship with sports because like I can't be so emotionally invested that
Hmm.
like my team losing brings me down. Whereas if I put that same emotional energy into my kids and my family, I get love back in return. So like my whole perspective is entirely different. Like you're never the same sports fan that you were as a kid, right? That where like so much hinges on that. So for me, it's like I would love to have the Sonics back to like have a real team. Like my wife's from
Yeah.
Oakland, so I've been a de facto Warriors fan since we got married in 2012. Very good timing.
Yeah.
Um, love cheering for Steph, but I'm also not like totally monogamous with the Warriors. Like they're not really my team. I didn't grow up with them, so
Hmm.
like I'm looking forward to
Not
having
Mr.
like a
Right, just
real
Mr. Right now. Yeah.
hey, Mr. Right now for like 12 years and very good at it.
Yeah, yeah.
I like the idea that like loving your children will end in crushing disappointment 29 out of 30 times, like sports. Just like, no, it just stays good. Like most things, you know how
Yeah,
most things don't always end in heartbreak?
yeah.
It's just like, I like this and it is good and remains good. That's kind of, maybe I'll do this thing instead.
I don't
Um,
know, Danny. How does your relationship
yeah.
like at the
Yeah.
prospect of the return to
It's
Sonics?
actually like if I really think about it, there's a lot of sliding doors that really changed my life with the Sonics leaving, honestly, because like I said, when I was growing up and all throughout my teenage years, basketball was my sport. I loved basketball. I played basketball. It was all I thought about. I remember drawing basketball cards. I would like have basketball
Hmm.
cards and then I would like draw them and like color them in and everything. I was like obsessed. I couldn't
Hmm.
get enough NBA. And the NBA was my sport at the time. And when the Sonics left, just kind of like both out of like anger and just out of like literally not I didn't have a team to root for anymore. I just stopped paying attention to the NBA and I got really into the NFL. And now I write about the NFL. I have a podcast about fantasy football, and the NFL draft. And my life changed probably because I didn't have a team to root for anymore. I mean, who knows? Maybe I would
Hmm.
have been an NBA writer instead or something like that. So, my interests changed after the Sonics left. I got really into the NFL, and now the NFL is my sport. And sorry again for continually saying football terms instead of basketball terms. That's just like where my brain is. But yeah, I think if the Sonics came back, kind of what you were saying, Matt, it's like I would have an opportunity to be like a real fan again because I'm like with the Seahawks, like I was definitely a huge fan when they won the Super Bowl. That was an amazing moment for me. But like now, I would say I'm more of just like I cover football all the time. It's like I don't have the highs and lows as like I used to because you just have to like pay attention to the other 31 teams. So yeah, it would be like an opportunity to have just regular fandom again. I'm not covering this team. I don't have to think of an angle. I don't have to have a take. I can just watch basketball and have fun. And I could take my son to that. He's 5, and I would love to like recreate that kind of like bonding with that I had with my dad growing up, going to the Sonics games and everything. I still have like a very just seared into my memory. And you can look it up. There was a dunk that Sean Kemp had against the Lakers where it was like a fast break. He definitely traveled, and then he just did this thunderous dunk, and the house came down. And I just like remember that so vividly. One of my favorite childhood memories. And like I would want to be able to create that with my son too. So like that's the kind of stuff that I look forward to. I do think the Sonics will come back. Or at least that's what Bill Simmons, my boss, keeps saying. So hopefully he's right. I think it's inevitable. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, that's so great. And then in 15 years they move away again and the
Oh
trauma
yeah.
passes to your children and you're like, no, no.
Time is a flat circle,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you both so much for coming on and sharing your pain. Hopefully this is therapeutic. None of
Yeah.
this was recorded. I just was doing this was all just an
Just
intervention for you,
therapy,
Matt, to
really.
get some of your
Yeah.
feelings out about the
Oh
the
man.
Thunder.
I can give you like a solid 10 to 15 more minutes on the Thunder and Clay Bennett and Aubrey McClendon's tragic death via auto accident, which I
Well,
felt awful about.
oh man. We'll do a an unrated version later with like lots of swearing and your
More
the
swearing.
cover will be your mouth covered with like duct tape and it'll be like unrated with one of those red stamps and stuff and it's just you swearing about the Thunder
Yeah.
for 4.5 hours.
If you need like a YouTube thumbnail for this, I can always give you some good face for like the Uber driver sucked me off, you know?
That's our show for the week. Thanks again to Matt and Danny for joining. Special thanks to my friend Steve Menegazzi for designing the Thrill of Defeat logo. And if you like the show, just tell people about it, leave an iTunes review, whatever you want. We'll be back next Tuesday with an all-new episode. Thanks so much for listening.